Alright guys, today we're going to look at SOL 9C. This will wrap us up for SOL 9. These notes aren't too terribly long. They're a pretty short section. In 9A, again, we looked at how the media can impact our laws and the political policy. Again, media, we're talking about TV, the news, internet, magazines, radio, things like that, and what they do to influence the laws. In 9B, we looked at what individuals and interest groups can do to influence the laws. The key there was, again, looking at the key word there, which is lobbying, making sure we understand. Again, lobbying means to try to influence our legislators to vote for or against a bill, or even introduce a bill if that's the way the interest group feels. So again, in 9A, it was all about the media. In 9B, it's lobbying and individuals and interest groups. In 9C, we are going to look more at kind of something that relates to SOL 8 and look at our local governments and see what our local governments must do in the event that something major happens. Okay, it says here on the first slide, it says international issues and events that would require policy decisions by local government officials could include the following. So what we're going to look at in this section of notes is what do our local governments have to be prepared for in an international issue. In other words, something is happening in the world, maybe not just in America, but anywhere in the world. What do we have to be prepared for locally? And when we say locally, again, we're talking about the units of local government that we looked at in SOL 8. We're talking about what does Wise County have to be prepared for? What does the town of Pound have to be prepared for? What are some of the international, again, international means worldwide, what are some worldwide issues that may impact us locally? And again, we're going to look at, I believe there's 4 examples of some international issues that, again, our towns and our counties must be prepared for. The first of those is public health concerns in the event of a pandemic. A pandemic is just an easier way. It's a major health concern. A pandemic might be a disease or some type of illness that could affect people on a large scale. It could be something that it could be life-threatening. So our local units of government must have some type of plan in place for if a public health concern happens. Several years ago, we did have something similar to this. We had the Ebola virus. We've also had several types of deadly flu viruses that have occurred over the last couple of decades. One that comes to mind, we actually have one called the swine flu or the bird flu that some people in America had actually died from when they had contracted these. So what we're looking at here in this section is if something like that was to happen, we must have a plan in place locally. Now, when these diseases occurred, no one in Wise County, to my knowledge, was affected. But had someone in Wise County contracted one of these viruses, then our county and our local governments must have a plan in place on how to take care of all of the people involved. For one, you'd have to try to quarantine the individual that is sick, and then try to make sure that other individuals don't get sick as well. So again, just have a plan. And we haven't seen this much in Wise County, but we have seen it in our local areas. Every now and then, when we have a large-scale illness, whether it be just a regular flu or something like that, we have seen local school systems close school. That's a plan that they have in place for when people get sick. one way to keep other people from getting sick and having this spread on a larger scale is to try to keep people away from one another. And school is one of those places where a lot of people come in contact with one another. We see each other every day in the classroom, in the hallway, in the cafeteria. So if a large number of people are getting sick, then perhaps closing school can help sort of control that illness. Again, we just have to have a plan in place for if something was to happen. We always hope that nothing does happen, but in the event something does, we have to be prepared for it locally. Next is the public safety in the event of an act of terrorism. If a terrorist activity happens, whether it be a bombing or some type of shooting or something like we saw, almost two decades ago on September the 11th, 2001, we have to have a plan in place for what we're going to do. We do try to prepare for some of this here at school. We have our lockdown drills that we go through. Those are our plan in the event of some type of terrorist activity. If something happens at school, our plan of action is to lock down the school, try to stay securely out of sight, and hope that we can get through whatever activity is taking place safely. It's not a fail-proof plan. Again, bad things can still happen, but that's a plan that has shown to be effective, and it's what we try to do here at school. But again, that's just focusing here at school. Our local law officials, they have training activities, they have plans for if something like this does happen, whether again it be a shooting at a public location or a bombing or some type of terrorist activity. If it was to happen locally, our law enforcement also has a plan. So again, that's all we're looking at here is just, we don't have to know the plan itself, but just understand that our local governments do have some sort of plan in the event of a health crisis or in the event of an act of terrorism. Okay, and then the last two, and again, this is all we look at here. Again, just some international things that we have to be prepared for locally. Number 3 says economic development policies in response to the emerging global economy. Kind of a wordy and not necessarily a difficult thing to understand, but the way it's worded could be a little complicated. It just means, again, economics is money. We'll be talking a lot more about economics once we get through the civics part of the class. Once we get to SOL 11, it's all about economics. We have to have a job type plan in place. The world is always changing. We have a lot more technology today, so we have a lot more of an economy that revolves around technology. So we have to be changing and adapting locally. For years and for decades, Wise County was focused on the coal industry and the mining industry. But as times progress, Wise County has to adapt and emerge and kind of keep up with the changes that are taking place, not just in Virginia or not just in America, but all across the world. So we have to be prepared for that. And then finally, locally, we have to have some policies in place to protect the environment. We have those in our areas. A lot of that has revolved around the mining industry. Again, coal mining has altered the environment in our area. And so we have laws and policies in place to try to maintain and protect our environment. Talk to anyone who's been involved in mining, and they'll tell you that we have a lot of policies and laws in place to make sure the water doesn't get polluted. A lot of mining companies have to have, things put in place to keep the water safe. There's a lot of reclaiming policies where when a mining company strips the land, they have to go back in and plant trees and plant grass to try and, again, protect the environment from when they're done. So we see a lot of those things in our area. The example there is wildlife protection. Again, the water to try to keep the fish and the water vegetation safe. We see hunting laws and hunting restrictions to try to help protect the environment and things there. So again, there's just a lot of policies in place here locally to try to protect the environment. Again, a lot of those that we see in our area, again, revolve around the coal mining and strip mining type industries. So again, that's pretty much it for this section. Again, a pretty short, simple section of notes. It ties in really well with what we looked at in SOL 8. In SOL 8, we focused on our local government. We talked about the county and the board of supervisors, our town and town councils, our city and city councils, our mayors, our managers, and those types of things. So this kind of takes that a little bit further, ties in our law enforcement, our police officers, ties in how we have to be prepared locally. We'd like to think that nothing major will ever affect us. We live in a small area in Wise County in rural Southwest Virginia. So we don't see a lot of these activities really happening that often in our area. We haven't seen a lot of terrorist activities. We don't see, those pandemics, those health concerns, occur in our area because we don't have a lot of we don't have a lot of people traveling from outside of our area that stop and stay in Southwest Virginia. We don't have any significant, landmarks or things like that for terrorist, activity to take place. But it doesn't mean it can't happen. As soon as you think it can't happen, it will. So what this section of notes is saying is that even though you don't think it will happen, you have to be prepared. And we have to have plans in place locally to help prevent anything that could be a worldwide issue from taking place here in our local government. Okay, that wraps up SOL 9.